So, welcome back, and hope everyone had a nice Pesach. Today, we commemorate Yom HaShoah, right? Holocaust Remembrance Day. And next week, we have Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day in Israel, and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. And we're just coming off of the Pesach holiday, and we're in the Omer, and it's going to be Shavuot. So we have a lot of, things going on. And what I want to do, hopefully, is through the discussion tonight, sort of focus on the parasha, on the text, on what's going on, but also hopefully apply that to the time that we're in right now with all these different things going on. So actually a little tidbit, which I'm not going to go so into because I was actually, looking around for a lot of different things about it. I might maybe go into in the next couple of weeks, but we're actually, because of the fact that last week, right, Shabbat for anyone who's not in Israel was still technically Pesach. So we read in Shul, we read the reading of the Torah that connects to that was for Chagim, for Pesach. However, in Eretz Yisrael, Pesach was technically over on Shabbat, and Shabbat was regular Shabbat, even though it was a little bit weird because we couldn't get back a chametz, but whatever. So, but the people in Israel read Perashat Ahare-Mot, and so now we're off kilter. Israel and the rest of the world are not on the same track for, I think it's another couple months. I'm not sure. I need to check exactly when we get back together. But basically, for the next definitely till we finish the series. But we're gonna be off kilter, and it was very interesting. I didn't do enough research to properly talk about it right now, but I hopefully will talk about it at another time. But I'm saying that because basically I'm here in Israel, and I think most of you that are listening are in America, so we're going to be off kilter. I'll try to, like this week is Perashat Ahare-Mot and Kedoshim, and a lot of times they are read together. So, and thematically they go together. So, and next week is Yom HaAtzmaut, so there won't be any class. So I decided to talk about, themes in both of them together tonight. And after Yom HaAtzmaut, the next few classes, I'll sort of see where I go with that. But I'll try to stay on the American track, I think, but we'll see. And I'll try to do themes in both Perashat. We'll see how it goes. So anyway, we're in Ahare-Mot if you're in America, and we're in Kedoshim if you're in Israel. And it's interesting because they don't only have a logistic juxtaposition that they're, next to each other, but they also have a thematic one. And many commentators look at these parashiyot as essentially the turning point of Sefer Vayikra. And we're going to go into that as we continue. So up until now, right, until this week, the previous parashiyot in Sefer Vayikra, it has been solely Mishkan centered, right? It's been things about the korbanot, the sacrifices, Tuma and Tahara, right? And in this week, or in the middle of the parasha, it sort of shifts to things that are not only pertaining to the Mishkan, but are pertaining to our daily life as well. And then that even continues into Kedoshim and later on in the parashiyot, in the coming parashiyot as we continue in the book. So, but before I go on, I want to say, yes, Tum'ah and Tahara do affect the person in their daily life, right? If a person is Tameh or Tahor, it affects them. However, it really only affects them in relation to the connection to the Mishkan. Meaning, if I am Tameh and I want to go to the Mishkan, I can't go. Right. But that's really, it doesn't affect necessarily other areas of my life. I'm still living my life. Right. I just can't go to the Mishkan. The only area that we really see that affects someone on a sort of more personal level is the Isha Nida, right? The woman who's Nida, who can't be with her husband. So it affects her on we still have remnants of that today. It's really the only remnant. So, I mean, we have also Tumat Met with the Kohanim that they can't go, to funerals and cemeteries. But so those are really the only remnants of that. But again, that really, it affects it more globally in connection to the Mishkan as opposed to more personally in my everyday life. And we start Ahare-Mot, right? Very Mishkan centered, where we talk about the avodah of Aaron the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and how he goes into the, the most holy, quintessential part of the Mishkan in the Kodesh Kodashim, right? Called the Holy of Holies, translated. And so let's pause for a minute, right? And let's think, let's look. This parasha starts off, it's called Ahare-Mot, right? After the death, right? After whose death? The death of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu. Now, why is the Torah bringing the story back in? We learned and we heard about their death in Perashat Shmini, which is 3 parashiot ago, right? So, and then we spoke about Tuma and Tahara, and we spoke about all those other things, Tzorah and Yoled, all the other things that are pertaining to that, Kashrut, right? We spoke about all these things, and now we're back to Ahare-Mot, after the death of the sons of Aharon. So why is it being brought up again here? And I think not only me, but the contrast is really showing, is here to show the difference between Nadav and Avihu and Aharon, or a future Kohen Gadols as well, or ones who will that will hopefully act appropriately, not like Nadav and Avihu. So basically, Nadav and Avihu, right? We spoke about this. If you want to go more into their story, I'm going to talk about it now a little bit, but the detail, please, feel free to go back to the Shmini class. But obviously, talk about it now a little bit, but if more detail, go back there. So Nadav and Avihu, they brought an esh zara, right? An esh, a foreign fire, or a fire that was not deemed appropriate or asked for by God. Like a zad is a straightener, right? So a strange or foreign fire, and they took the relationship, again, we spoke about this more detail, but they took their relationship with God into their own hands, deciding what he wanted, what I wanted to give him, basically. And they made this one-sided. And now God is saying, you want to have an elevated relationship with me, right? This is how you do it in a proper, connected way. This is what I want in the avodah of the Yom Kippurim that he's going to explain. So we see that Nadav and Avihu, they brought their fire, and their fire, right? They brought the Ketoret with the fire. Well, they say it was cut, but they brought some sort of fire burning, right? That they brought the fire, and instead of it uniting, right? God is considered also fire, right? Instead of uniting with the fire of God, God's fire consumed them, and they were unable to maintain and sustain their relationship because they didn't recognize their place versus God's place in the relationship. Now here, when we talk about the avodah of Yom Kippurim, right? When Aaron is commanded and told explicitly the directions of how to do this, where he goes in and hopefully will be unscathed going into this high level of God's presence in the Kodesh Kodashim, it's very similar. He brings in the fire, he brings in these things, but it's all commanded and dictated very specifically. And now what's interesting is a lot of times we see God described as Esh and we see God described as Nanan, right? He's sometimes described as fire and he's sometimes described as a cloud. And here we see sort of bridging those two ideas. What happens? We see that you can imagine, right, the image. Aharon walks in to the Kodesh Kodashim with his, Ketoret burning, with his incense burning, and there's a smoke cloud, from the fire on top of the incense, the Ketoret. Now, where's he going? He's going to the Kodesh Kodashim. What's in the Kodesh Kodashim? Inside the Kodesh Kodashim is the Aron Habrit, and it is said, excuse me, that the Shekhinah of Hashem, resides there in the presence of an Anan. So now, what's the ideal? What is hopefully going to happen and culminate in this back and forth here with Aharon and God, is that the clouds will merge, not the fire, but the clouds will merge. And the cloud brought by Aharon from the fire of the Ketoret will merge with God's cloud that he comes down to us in the Kodesh Kodashim on the Aron Habrit. So, and when Aharon, and this is majorly contrasting Nadav and Avihu, who was all about the Esh as opposed to the cloud, and that there was all about them imposing their place on the relationship instead of where Aharon is now going to merge in the relationship and unite and build that relationship. So, and we see from here very explicitly, very clearly, it's not about, I mean, all the time, right? Obviously, there's certain things that you shouldn't do, but it's not about necessarily what you do, but it's also very, very important about how you do it and what your mindset and intentions are, right? Is it about me fulfilling my individual wants and needs in this relationship, like Nadav and Abihu did? Or is it about me thinking about the way my needs and the other's needs can merge and unite and work together, as with Aharon when God is telling him this procedure? And what's interesting is that if you read the psukim, right? I should have bought them. I didn't have time to do a slideshow. But if you read the psukim, you see that it details the whole procedure. And then only at the end, it tells us this is on Yom Kippurim, right? It only says this is in the 7th month that you're doing this every Yom Kippur, right? And this, the fact that it's written in that way, that it describes the process and only after says when we do the process, this leads a very interesting, I mean, I think a very interesting interpretation from the Vilna Gaon, that he says that unlike the Kohanim, other Kohanim Gedolim after him, who only could do this process on Yom HaKippurim, Aharon was able to do this whenever he chose. Aharon was, according to the Vilna Gaon, was able to enter the Kodesh HaKodashim whenever he chose, if he followed the correct protocol and procedure, listed here by God. And I think this is so, this is even more of a reason to mention Nadav and Abihu, because I'm not going to go so into this now, but we spoke about how a lot of it was recreating the experience that they saw on Har Sinai, right? That closeness that they felt with God on Mamad Har Sinai when they were getting, during Matan Torah, they wanted to recreate that. They wanted to get back to that level of closeness with God. And it seems that Aharon, who also was the only Kohen Gadol, right, that witnessed this, he would also feel that need at times. And God is telling him specifically, according to the Vilna Gaon, right, not other Kohanim Gadolim, but him specifically, that if you choose and you feel the need to get to that level of closeness with me, that's fine, and I accept that, and I welcome that, if you do it according to the procedure and the standards that I line out for you, and you realize my place and your place in this relationship. So I think, so I think that this is really getting us into a place where we're really focusing on balancing and getting to this idyllic relationship with God that the Kohen Gadol gets to on Yom Kippurim, and contrasting that to a non-idyllic situation where Nadav and Abihu had. So this whole Avodat Yom Kippurim, right, which starts off the parasha, is like, I think, like, in a sense, the quintessential Mishkan-centered information, right? Like, if you're going to ask what's the most important, I mean, I don't know, maybe not, but I feel like it's a very pinnacle thing dealing with the Mishkan when you're talking about Kodesh HaKodashim and the Ahare-Mot Hashem and how to merge unite us with God. That's the whole purpose of the Mishkan, is that us and God, right? That God and us dwell together. And then, but then not all of a sudden, but then in the middle of the parasha, in Perek 18, Perek Yirchet, God tells Moshe, he switches the conversation a little bit, and we shift from the Mishkan center talk, and God tells Moshe to tell the nation, to warn the nation to not act in the ways of Mitzrayim and Canaan. And he goes on to describe all the arayot, the illicit relationships, forbidden relationships that we shouldn't, and that are forbidden to us and that we can't do, and that we shouldn't act like them and do the immoral and unjust things that the Canaanim and Mitzrim do, and he warns us that if we do them, we're going to get kicked out of the land that he's giving us, just like where he's going to kick out the Canaanim. And then we go into Perashat Kedoshim, right? That in Perashat Kedoshim, we totally shift and we talk from the Mishkan, and we talk about all these things in our daily life, right? In our daily individual life of Israel. It talks about a bunch of different laws, but just to name a few, a lot of things that have to do with social justice. It talks about conducting yourself honestly in business, not stealing, not cheating, not taking revenge, keeping Shabbat, right? Our weekly schedule, being honest, all these things, right? helping those, giving, ways in which we have to help those less fortunate than us, just to name a few. So what is going on here? Why the shift, right? Why the shift from Mishkan focused, Tuman Tara focused, korbanot, this intense relationship with God in the Mishkan that we're having, the most intense relationship that a person could have. Other than Moshe, obviously, but the Kohen Gadol going into Kodesh Kodashim on Yom Kippurim, this is like major stuff. And then we shift to, don't cheat in business. Make sure you're honest when you give someone the change, the weights. And things like that, and make sure you give the widow and the orphan the part of the field for them to come take, right? So why this big shift of seemingly very, very different topics and ideas? So to answer this, I want to look at the idea of what is Kedusha in Judaism, right? Because I think that a lot of us, myself included, a lot of us are tainted by this idea of Kedusha and holiness through a Christian lens, which a lot of times in the world we live in, or Muslim lens, right? We see different interpretations and different ideals of Kedusha, or seemingly of holiness that we think, and then that's not really a Jewish ideal. So, maybe I'm wrong, but I think for me at least, at first glance, when you have your first preconceived notion, Kedusha, and when you think of someone who's holy, you think of, a monk and someone who's very removed from the physical world. They're praying all day, they're meditating all day, they're solely focused on God. They don't eat, they don't sleep, they're just learning and praying and meditating and thinking about God. Now that's, very nice, all for them, but that's very different than what the Jewish version or the Torah's version of Kedusha is. Because when God says Kedoshim tu kadosh ani, and then he outlines that, what is he telling us? He's not telling us to go sit in a room and pray all day. He's not telling us to, not interact with the world and just learn all day. Or pray, he's telling us things that seem mundane, right? That seem not holy aspects of our life. It seems like my business dealings, the way I interact with other people, my weekly schedule, right? And so how does all these seemingly not holy things, why are they listed and how are they connected to this idea of holiness? So holiness in the Torah, we see, has to do a lot with the idea of havdalah, of separation, right? That but when something becomes holy, it's separate, right? Like God separated Shabbat from the rest of the week and made it a holy day, right? When David, later on, but when David captures all different nations around Israel, and he separates from the spoils, from the shalal, he separates that for the avodat Beit HaMikdash, right? That his son Shlomo should use in the Beit HaMikdash. He makes that holy by separating it. If I want to go give a korban, obviously in that time, I separate and I say this cow or this sheep or whatever it may be, or is separate and it's holy, that I'm going to bring to the Mishkan or the Mikdash and do that korban. So this, and we see also in terms of people, right? The Leviim, Shevet Levi, was separated to be the holy Shevet who works in the Mishkan as the Kohanim and Leviim. And from this, we see that there are essentially three levels, or not necessarily levels, or three different tiers of Kedusha. We have Kedushat Hamakom, right? Which is basically a place, right? Makom place, which is what we've been talking about in Vayikra up until now, the holiness and the importance and the separation of the Mishkan from the rest of the Machaneh, and how, because the Mishkan is separate from the Machaneh, how we act in there, how we conduct ourselves, and all those things in the Mishkan. Now, we also, a little bit later, which we'll talk about soon, towards the end of the class, but we also will see that in relation to Eretz Yisrael itself, to the land of Israel, right? So we have this aspect of holiness of place, of Kedushat of Makom, of the Mishkan and the Mikdash, eventually, and Eretz Yisrael. And then we also have this idea of Kedushat Zman, of time, with Shabbat, which we'll talk about a little bit now, and then later on, we'll talk about the Chagim, and later Parashat and Vayikra. So, which are called Moadim in the Torah, right? Moadim are meeting points in time, right? Separate meeting points in time where we meet with God, meet essentially with this holiday. And then we also have Kedushat Ha'adam, the holiness of a person, in terms on a smaller level with the Kohanim and Leviim, but also on a national level that we're God's chosen nation amongst all the nations. So not only are the Kohanim and Leviim holy within our nation, but our whole nation, right? Mamlechet Kohanim the Goy Kadosh, God called us, right? Or that's our goal, right? And if we want to uphold the title of Mamlechet Kohanim the Goy Kadosh, then we have to maintain these three different levels of separation and kedusha in our life. And I think that's why the shift happens here. Because until now, we were talking about all the kedusha aspects in the Mishkan, which is it's an extreme, intense, hyper-focused, saturated level of kedusha in this space for us and for our space as a meeting place to God and to build this relationship. And however, it can't only be there, right? We can't only have the relationship there. I mean, I'm going to give a very, extreme or, crude analogy, but imagine if a married couple, right? They said, in our house, we're married and we're going to care about each other and we're going to build our relationship as best as we can and communicate and talk and all these great things. And we're going to have the perfect, great relationship where we're completely invested in each other. But, when we leave the house, I'm not really going to look at you and I'm going to go do whatever I want and you go do whatever you want. And unless we're in the house where we're doing whatever we want independently and we're not going to have any connection. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think that's a very healthy marriage, right? So same thing here. If we would say that we're only going to have this relationship with God in the Mishkan, and then I go out and I could, live my life and do whatever I want and have my business and my relationships with other people and the way I treat, other people and the way I treat, the general world and population around me, and I don't do it in the right way, that's ruining the relationship, right? That's why there's this idea. That's why there's the idea of Naval B'Shut Torah, right? That you could be, that someone could technically be following the Torah, according to the letter of the law, but they're not really following the Torah because they're not doing it with the right intention and the right spirit and the right way, and they're not living a life properly, exuding that relationship with God. And again, it's not that we don't need to have that reminder and be in the Mishkan, right? It is very important that we have that time, that time to build that relationship. And that's why God commands us that we should go when we have the Mikdash, right, in the Mishkan, 3 times a year, right? You go to Makom Asher Yichad, right, on the Shlosh Regalim, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, right? So you have 3 times in the year where you're commanded to go up to the Mishkan, be in that intense relationship, and those 3 times are supposed to let you take that energy and that connection and the way you built your relationship with God and help you sustain the rest of the time till the next one. It's like if you go with a spouse or with a friend on a certain, on a trip or a certain date, date night, and and you have that connection and that special time with each other, and that helps you to strengthen the relationship even when you're doing the mundane day-to-day things, going to work and house life and kid life and everything else. That time when you're alone and connected together on an extreme level, on a vacation or even just going for a night out or whatever it may be, that carries you through. So that is very important. However, now we're shifting and showing it has to be also in the real world, and this relationship with God is actualized and strengthened when I can take those lessons of morality and justice out of that I'm hopefully gaining from God, right? That God wants me to do and be an Or Lagoim and conduct myself honestly in business and help those that are less fortunate from me and take the Shabbat to weekly pause and focus on my relationship with myself, my relationship with God, my relationship with others, and take that time. And it's just funny. It just came to mind when I was preparing the class, but I remember that when I was in elementary school, and if anyone who remembers this, every time before a vacation, the principal would say, before vacation, he would say, don't forget that God is still in Aruba and he's still in Florida and he's in, you just name places that people go on vacation. And he said, he's not only in school, right? He's all over. Don't forget that, like meaning, don't think that, on a kid level, especially, like, don't think that you only need to follow the rules and be, and be appropriate and pray and follow whatever, the different things and acting in a proper way when you're in school. You have to take that even when you're on vacation, even when you're out in the quote unquote real world or regular world in a more relaxed environment. And I think this point is strengthened even more by, if we look in Perashat Kedoshim, and you see the repetition of the phrase Ani Hashem Elokechem or Ani Hashem Elokechem, back and forth, either one of those phrases. It's like nonstop. After every time, not every time, but a lot of the laws that God tells us, he ends it with Ani Hashem Elokechem, Ani Hashem, or one or the other. And I think this constant need to be reminded is bringing us back to that Mamad Har Sinai experience, because what's the first of the Aseret Devrot that we heard, right, that all the nation heard, was Anochi Hashem Elokecha, which is similar to Ani Hashem, right? I am God, same thing. And it's bringing us back to the initial point of the relationship where Anochi Hashem Elokecha, right? I am your God that took you out of Mitzrayim. And remember that I am God. Remember that level of relationship and that level of brit when you do all these things, right? When you're acting in your daily life. And remember that I took you out of Egypt, not only on a physical level, right? But also on a spiritual level, and freed you from their unjust and moral ways, right? They actually, it's there's so much midrashim and so much interpretation of how low and steeped in tum'ah the nation was, that if God didn't take them out, we would have never gotten out. That 1/5 of the people only got out, and the rest of the people stayed in the depths of tum'ah of Mitzrayim. And then we see later, whenever Bnei Yisrael sinned in Avodah Zarah, the Chachamim always talk about the fact that Bnei Yisrael only sinned in Avodah Zarah just to allow themselves arayot, forbidden relationships, because the nations of the time were so immoral that the things they would do to serve their gods were immoral acts, and they channeled it as serving God, but it was all serving their own desires and their own self. And here God is also saying, right, that the land you're going to is a constant reflection of that relationship. The land itself will not tolerate immoral or unjust behaviors. I'm just going to, one of the two, there's a couple, but one of them, it says, such a very graphic language, that the land shouldn't throw you up or spit you out the way it spit out the other nations due to their tumah. And it's showing that the land is personified almost as allergic to tumah, to injustice, to all these immoral and injustice acts. And don't think that you're immune to this. Don't think that you're above this. And the same way that the Canaanim were kicked out when they acted inappropriately, so will you be, as unfortunately we saw in, especially in Sefer Melachim and the Galut, right? How they got to a point that they were so, they were at such a low level that they got kicked out of Eretz Yisrael. With that, I want to come back and hopefully tie this all in a little bit to the time period we're in, right? Post Pesach, Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaTzmaut. And so we just came off from the Pesach holiday, right? We just finished last week. Hope everyone had a good holiday. And we celebrated freedom, right? The holiday, Zman Herutenu. And we don't only commemorate the freedom, but we are told that we have to look at it as if we ourselves left Mitzrayim. Every generation has to look as if we left Mitzrayim. Now, we have to look in terms of our own personal baggage, whatever's tying us down, whatever's enslaving us on whatever level that may be, spiritual, physical, moral, whatever that's holding us back. We need to free ourselves of that. And that's obviously a very personal thing. And we could look at that in every area of our life, which is, what Perashat Kedoshim talks about, right? Where am I feeling enslaved? Where am I feeling stuck? Where am I feeling that I need to get out of in my daily life? And realize Ani Hashem Elokechem, right? Realize that God is this God and has this relationship with me, and I need to be there in the right spot. And we also unfortunately know, like we say in Hisha in the Haggadah, right, that in every generation there will be those that want to take those freedoms away from us, that want to end us. And obviously, most recently, we see that that was most apparent in the Holocaust in most recent history. Unfortunately, it wasn't the first time, right? But it's the most recent time where such an extreme atrocity happened on such a extreme level. And despite how horrific and just terrifying and horrible the situation was, as a nation, we will always prevail, right? Even though it damaged us immensely, right? It's horrible, but we're still standing here. And that only comes with the help of God. And we can't forget that. We can't forget that the way to prevail and to move forward is to maintain that relationship and thrive in that relationship with God. And I actually just saw someone who I follow on Instagram. She posted her grandmother's a Holocaust survivor, and she posted that she went to her to be with her today on Yom HaShoah. She lives in Israel, and there's a siren this morning, and she went to her to be with her this morning, and she said that her grandmother told her, every day for me is Yom HaZikaron. I remember my family that I lost. I remember the experience I went through. I don't want to talk about it. Today is no different than any other day for me in terms of, my relationship with them and my memories and all that. But what I want to do today is to make schnitzel for my family and feed my family. And that's the way she wins, and it's just so amazing that this woman is, I think, 90 something years old. And all she wants to do to show that she won is provide and give to her family that she thankfully built in Eretz Yisrael. That's the way she wins. And I think that that's a true picture of what Am Yisrael is about. It's not about these lofty, crazy things. It's about the relationships that we sustain and we maintain and the giving that we do in our own life. And next week, we're going to have Yom HaZikaron, right? Remembering all those that lost their lives. So we could, so I could sit here right now, and be here and raise my kids in Israel and be so lucky to have that you can't forget that. And when we shift immediately the next day, that night, the next day to Yom HaAtzmaut, we appreciate and celebrate and thankful for their sacrifice and all of their and God's benevolence allowing us to thrive here. And I think that this all comes back to the fact that we can't forget the lesson of Nadav and Avihu, and in contrast, and learn what Aharon learned, that this relationship is two-sided, and we must know our place and we must maintain it. And not only when it's convenient, and not only when it's easy, but even in the nitty-gritty and in all aspects of our life, even when they don't seem like it's so connected, right? But really to always find that circle. And I think that that's the way we hopefully will truly become a Mamlechet Kohanim and Goy Kadosh. So thank you. And I will not see you next week. So enjoy your Yom HaAtzmaut, and we'll see you after that. Thank you.